Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have John Phillips, co-founder of PredictIt, the stock market for politics. We're going to take a look at those midterm elections. John, it's great to see you as always, and we're finally at this point where we're going to see what the results are versus the conjecture out there that the Dems or the Republicans are going to get House during the midterms. Starting with Ohio, the voters are going to head to the polls tomorrow to vote for Democratic and Republican nominees for the midterm elections in what is a very crowded field.
Boy, it sure is, Jill, and it's such an interesting race because it's not just what's happening on the Republican side with the primary, but also what's happening in terms of the vote count, but also with respect to the Trump endorsement, and then to the history in Ohio, where you've got an open primary, which means Democrats and independents can vote in the Republican primary tomorrow. And as you may recall, when Kasich and Trump were up against each other in the 2020 presidential Republican primary, Kasich won with the support of some of those independents and Democrats. So there's a lean for moderates along the political spectrum that may shuffle the whole deck.
So what does the field look like here?
Well, so it looks like J.D. Vance is going to take the top slot, but it's not entirely certain. So he's now at 75% odds to win. And to make it, and then the number two is going to make it into because it's a crowded field. If the number two gets 30 to 35% of the vote, they're going to make it into the runoff. And it looks like Matt Dolan, who's the state senator and Cleveland's Guardians owner, is riding a late wave of momentum to surpass Josh Mandel for second place. And so that would put Dolan, the more moderate, up against J.D. Vance, the more conservative candidate, in a two-way race in what I just described as an open primary. So it could be that because the field is crowded and because Dolan has surged, it may be that Dolan could be the Republican nominee to face Tim Ryan in the fall, who's going to get the Democratic nomination.
And after Ohio, next week, voters will make a choice in the Republican primary election for West Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. And John, this is a member versus member primary.
Well, that's right. It's interesting. You don't get too many of those, but because of redistricting, you've got two members who are running against each other. You've got David McKinley and Alex Mooney. McKinley took heat from Trump for voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And while that's not good in a Republican primary, actually, Joe Manchin endorsed McKinley over Mooney as Trump endorsed Mooney over McKinley. So you've got a surrogate war going on with these two members of Congress running against one another. Over the weekend, Manchin's endorsement came in. McKinley is now at 50% odds on PredictIt. Mooney at less than that. This is going to be probably a close one.
And finally, in Pennsylvania, PredictIt traders are closely watching both the Democratic and Republican primaries for the Senate seat currently held by retiring Senator Pat Toomey.
Right. Don't you just love this race in Pennsylvania? So on the Democratic side, you've got a to the left candidate in the form of John Fetterman. Connor Lamb was expected to do quite well against Fetterman, but the Democrats in Pennsylvania seem determined to nominate the more liberal candidate. So Fetterman is at 92% odds to get the Democratic nomination. And then you get over to the Republican side, which is so interesting. You've got a toss-up between Dr. Oz, who got the Trump endorsement, and David McCormick, who's gotten the endorsement of other Republicans, such as Kellyanne Conway, Mike Pompeo, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and even Ted Cruz. McCormick is a businessman. Oz is a TV personality. It's going to be interesting to see. Again, we're going to see what the value of the Trump endorsement is across the board this week and next. There's a third candidate, Kathy Barnett, who is still viable, but she's in single digits according to PredictIt traders.
Yeah, John, it's so interesting. I mean, if you put your entire life either behind business or towards public service, and then you get someone who has, I guess, brand name recognition because they're within show business, it's got to be a little bit frustrating when you've kind of like worked to get to this culmination of your career, and then it just shows the power of endorsements and what name recognition will get for you.
It's a primary. So in primaries, all bets are off, and you're appealing to a very narrow slice of the electorate, except in Ohio, as we just talked about, where you've got a whole horde of people who are not in the Republican Party coming in to decide who the Republican nominee is going to be. How much mischief will that make?
All right, John, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks, Jill.